Most people are still convinced that the housing market today is going to be a repeat of the crash of 2008.
We're all gonna die!
The elements that are needed for that crash to happen are just non-existent today.
Oh, thank God.
Experts from Bank of America actually feel that this housing market is very similar to the early 1980s.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious.
Oh, we are serious, my friends. Stick around today. I'm going to talk about this article from Fortune.com where it's sharing Bank of America's analysis on the housing market and how they feel it is a repeat of the 1980s and not 2008. This is a good one, guys, so stick around. If I had a dime for every time I saw a news headline or a video here on this platform talking about the market is just like 2008 and it's going to crash, I would not have to sell houses anymore. Things are way different than where they were in 2008. Now, they are looking a lot like the 1980s because of the rising interest rate, but there was one other key factor that Bank of America discovered that's very similar to what happened in the 1980s, and we're experiencing that right now. So let's get into this article. I'm going to share with you what they're saying about this. It's really interesting. So again, this is from Fortune.com. The title of the article is Buckle Up for More Turbulence in the Housing Market. BOA says it's a housing recession, 1980s style. Housing market pessimists have been sounding the alarm for years about a pending crash in the U.S. residential real estate market. Even before the Federal Reserve began hiking interest rates to fight inflation last year, pushing mortgage rates to a 23-year high this month, years of surging home prices left experts warning that the housing market was a massive bubble ready to pop. However, despite a widely bearish outlook in the industry, most real estate veterans have avoided arguing that home prices will drop like they did during the 2008 crash that kicked off the global financial crisis. And so far, that's been a wise decision. Who else has been saying that it's not going to crash like 08?
You got it, dude.
It took until June 2022 for national home prices to peak, even as mortgage rates soared and purchase applications plummeted amid the Fed's interest rate hikes. And while prices fell more than 5% from that peak by January of this year, they returned to a record high in July. Still, a Bank of America team led by U.S. economist Jaceo Park warned this week that there's more turbulence coming for the housing market due to high mortgage rates. They explained that they're getting an eerie feeling of deja vu, but it's not 2008 that comes to mind. It's the 1980s. Looking back at previous housing recessions, we think the 1980s are a better analogy for today's market than the 2008 housing crash. Wait till you see how they explain this one, and it makes complete sense. While the housing crash of 2008, fueled by the collapse of subprime mortgages, haunts the memories of many Americans, the real estate market of that era was very different from what Bank of America's experts see today. Park and his team noted that there are no noticeable signs of excess housing development today like there were back then, and households aren't nearly as burdened by mortgage debt. Household mortgage debt represented roughly 65% of U.S. consumers' disposable income in the second quarter, compared to 100% before the global financial crisis. Wow. And the ratio of Americans' mortgage debt to their real estate assets, that's also called their loan to value, was just 27% in the second quarter, compared to over 40% in 2008 and roughly 50% in 2010. And this is all from Bank of America's data. Now, it also goes on to say that new legislation was enacted since the global financial crisis to help prevent worst-case scenarios in the housing market. One of the most obvious effects of these new laws is that there are far fewer risky adjustable rate mortgages today. Adjustable rate mortgages can lead to higher default rates when interest rates rise, but now they represent less than 5% of total purchase and refinance loans, compared with over 35% at the peak of the pre-global financial crisis housing cycle. We reiterate, we do not expect another housing crash like 2008. Park and his team concluded after presenting this evidence, and I can get behind that. It is so true. You cannot get the loans that they got back prior to 2008. That is a key thing. It's why we're not seeing a crash like we did in 2008. It's one of the key things. But listen to this and how they're comparing this to the 1980s. Oh my God, it makes sense. According to Bank of America, today's housing market looks a lot more like the early 1980s than it does 2008. Back then, just like today, home prices had boomed for years before Fed officials were ultimately forced to hike interest rates aggressively in an attempt to fight inflation. The rise in the consumer price index peaked at around 14% in 1980 before then Fed Chair Paul Volcker's hawkish policies sent mortgage rates to 18% in a year's time. Did you hear that? 18%. How many boomers out there that are watching this remember those 18% mortgage rates?
Don't mess with the bull, young man. You'll get the horns.
So those rates at 18% cooled inflation, but it sparked a recession. This caused a serious downturn in the housing market in which home sales and building levels cratered. However, national home prices actually remained stable. At the start of Volcker's term as Fed chair in August of 1979, the median U.S. home sales price was $64,700. And even after a near doubling of mortgage rates, that figure rose to $69,400 by the second quarter of 1981. What? So that's crazy. Prices still went up with 18% interest rates.
Wave your hands in the air like you just don't care.
Over the past 18 months, the Fed's current chair, Jerome Powell, has been following a very similar game plan to Volcker's, raising interest rates aggressively to quash inflation. The average 30-year fixed mortgage rate, the most common type of mortgage in the U.S., has soared from 3.8% in March of 2022 to over 7.5% today as a result. Actually, as of today, October 10th, they're more like 8%. This in turn has slowed mortgage purchase applications and caused home sales to plummet, just as it did in the 1980s, but home prices, echoing the dynamic of that era, have yet to collapse. Why? Why have they not collapsed? One of the key reasons for the resilience of the housing market in both of these periods is demographics. Yep. Noticeably, demographics were favorable back then, with baby boomers having entered the prime home buying age. Park and his team wrote Thursday, arguing millennials are in a similar position today. Some sales activities should be supported by millennials reaching the prime home buying age, and single family building permits have steadily held up. This can help the housing market retain some of its momentum without falling apart. Thank you, millennials. Thank you. You guys are the ones keeping this market afloat right now, believe it or not.
I feel the need for speed.
Bank of America economists believe that low inventory of existing homes for sale combined with solid home sales to millennials could help put a floor beneath the home prices. But that doesn't mean there won't be some near-term pain due to higher mortgage rates. So this is why prices are not crashing down. There's too much of a demand. There are so many millennials that are in this market right now to buy. This has been going on since 2019. If you remember, actually 2020, before the pandemic, they had predicted that it was going to be a big year for home sales. It was going to be one of the craziest years with the market, because the amount of millennials that were reaching home buying age and entering the housing market to buy their first home. So this is going back a few years, and it's still to this day keeping the market afloat because of the high demand from them. So the article goes on to say, with rates likely staying higher for longer, we are cautious of a potential turbulence ahead. Bank of America has previously forecast 0% home price growth and falling home sales for the full year 2023, but it didn't offer a new prediction in its latest note. I'm curious to see what the prediction is going to be now with all of this new data out here and the rates at 8%. I wonder if this is still going to stay the same, or if they're still seeing 0% home price growth. My guess is I think it's going to remain flat. And if they do come down, the rates do come down, yeah, I think, well, hell's going to break loose again, guys. But
maybe not.
see, the article goes on to say, eventually, as inflation fades, leading the Fed to cut interest rates, housing affordability will improve. At that stage, we should see a more stable and healthy housing market. Until then, hang tight. It may be a bumpy ride.
May the force be with you.
And look, it is a bumpy ride right now. Like I said, we're at 8%, and I'm already seeing the impact on the housing market, especially here in New Jersey. People are pulling back now that the rates are higher. And typically this time of year is much slower. You don't see that many people out, in the market compared to the spring market. But the interest rates, now they're at 8%. People are kind of freaked out. But 18%, guys. 1980s, the rates are at 18%. So it's not that bad. And I know prices are a lot higher now. I know you're going to come at me and say, well, the prices are higher. Yes. But 18%, can you imagine? Oh my God. So with these rates hovering around 8%, will homes ever become affordable again? I highly recommend you check out this video where you'll get a different perspective from another expert talking about housing affordability and where they see that going towards the end of the year and into next year. Thank you so much for watching me today. To get your dose of real estate reality, my name is Jackie Baker, and I will see you next time.